Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bharagava again. Welcome to Tidbits on Business and Finance with me. In India, we have 21 public sector banks. These banks are owned, managed and controlled by the Government of India. And because they are primarily owned by the Government of India, their management and ownership structure should be robust and simple. The government appoints its top executives, which is the chairman, managing director and executive directors. It also appoints nominees on the board of directors of these banks, which are generally senior IAS officers drawn from the government. At times, it also appoints outside professionals on the board of these banks. What complicates the management structure is that the government insists that the Reserve Bank of India also appoint its own nominees on the board of directors of these banks. This creates a huge conflict of interest. The nominees appointed by the Reserve Bank of India are normally their serving or retired high-ranking officers. Not only are these nominees of the RBI appointed on the board of banks, but thereafter the banks also appoint them on their top management and executive committees, where the banks take crucial decisions on giving big ticket loans, high value loans, write-off proposals wherever there are restructuring or write-off cases, and also the large capital and revenue expenditure items are a matter of discussion in these management committees. In other words, the Reserve Bank nominee participates in the management of banks. And this is where the conflict of interest is created. A regulator cannot be part of the management of a regulated. The regulated does not need to involve the regulator in its management, because if it does that, it creates a huge conflict of interest which compromises the authority of the regulator and even dilutes its independence. It is like an auditor appointing its nominee on the board of directors of every company it audits. Its authority and independence both get compromised. It is like what a newspaper remarked in its editorial, that it's like the CAG appointing its nominee on the board of every public sector undertaking that it audits. That's a huge conflict of interest. Authorities get undermined, they get diluted, the very purpose of regulation gets lost. And it is for this reason that every Reserve Bank governor has very often objected to the nominees of the RBI being appointed on the board of banks. It has requested the government to amend the law so that the Reserve Bank does not need to appoint its nominees on the board of banks. But the government refuses. The government refuses for a very specious and shallow and untenable reason. It says that these nominees of the Reserve Bank, they have domain knowledge on banking regulation and supervision, and that really helps to improve the management of banks. This excuse does not carry any weight, because such kind of a domain knowledge should best be hired by taking on board outside independent professionals. There is no need or reason for the regulator to come in with the domain knowledge. And if the government was so concerned about improving the management of banks, it should stop interfering. The bureaucratic and political meddling and interference in banks will stop, and most of the problems of banks will actually stop too. So if you want to improve the management of banks, what the government needs to do is stop meddling in the management of banks rather than insisting on the Reserve Bank of India nominees being appointed on the board of banks. And if they really need domain knowledge, let it come by way of appointment of outside independent professionals. The former Reserve Bank Governor Raghuram Rajan had taken up this issue with the government. He said that the Reserve Bank needs to be a pure play regulator and should not appoint its nominees on the board of banks. The government turned down his request. The present governor, Mr. Urjit Patel, too put in such a request, and his request too was turned down. This creation of a conflict of interest is not good for banking in India. It is also not good because very often when there is a banking crisis, the government itself tells the Reserve Bank, it is your nominees too who are on the board of directors of banks. Why were you not aware of it? When the Reserve Bank itself doesn't want to be on the board of banks, which it is rightly saying so, it is time for the government to amend the law and stop the Reserve Bank from appointing its nominees on the board of banks. This is Akhilesh Bharagava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.